Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Alien Romulus. Of course, as the title says, there will be spoilers in the second half, but I'll let you guys know when we get to that. So kicking things right off, non-spoiler wise, I really enjoyed it. I was excited to see this. I like Alien, I like Aliens, and I've seen Covenant, and then that's it. So I've seen 3, now 4 Alien movies, and I think, shoot, I saw the first 2 movies like super late, like within the last maybe like 10 years, I saw Alien and Alien. It took a long time to finally see both those movies, and I love them both. I thought they were both really good movies. And then it was like, all right, I've seen Covenant, like I said, and then I just haven't seen the last 2. I was just like, you know, it just didn't feel, even from the trailers, they didn't really feel the same. And probably it was because after I saw Covenant, it was like, it just doesn't feel the same as the other 2. And even just already with that, I was kind of just like, okay. And I've seen Alien versus Predator. Or take that as you will. I've seen Alien versus Predator. But going into this, I was like, okay, first off, trailer looks really good. I was like, okay, this looks like it's going to be a fun Alien movie. Secondly, Fede Alvarez. He did Don't Breathe. I really enjoy that movie. He did Evil Dead, like the remake with Mia in it, not the most recent, which is Rise of the Evil Dead. I'm pretty sure it's the name, but he did the one, like the reboot Evil Dead. And I love that movie. I love the crap out of that one. So I was like, all right, I'm excited. Like once I saw that, I was like, I like both those movies. Mia, I forgot the actress's name, unfortunately, but she's in both those movies as well. So I like both those movies, and I was like, all right, I really like how he directs stuff and like kind of his vision for how he does horror-based things. I'm excited to check this out. And the fact that I found out it was supposed to be on Hulu. It was supposed to just be like a Hulu movie, and then they're like, no, we kind of like this. Like that's what they did with Prey, where it was like, it was a Hulu movie. I would have enjoyed seeing that in theaters, honestly. I thought that was a great movie. But same thing with this. It was supposed to be on Hulu, and then they're like, let's kind of bump this up a little bit. And it was definitely worth it. I really enjoyed it because, of course, I see everything with the D-box seating, which is the moving seats. So I loved it for this movie. And you don't get it too often. You know, in a lot of movies, it's kind of set on Earth, or even if it's like extra comic book stuff, there's not a lot of stuff with flight. I think the last time I really had one where it was like, oh, you get to enjoy like flying in the motion seats was when I went to see Top Gun. And that's it. Like there aren't a lot of movies, and you realize this when you get into those seats, there aren't a ton of movies where it's like you're moving around and like things are in space, or you know, like slowly moving in zero gravity. So this movie was absolutely fantastic for that, like just the little motions. And there's specifically one scene early on where they like first introduce zero gravity, and the camera's like spinning around and the seat moved like just a little, and I actually got like slightly disoriented because the seat moved and my head was like straight, but the camera was also moving, and I was like, ooh, that threw me off for like half a second. Like right as I was about to get messed up, it cut to a different scene, and I was like, that was about to get me, because like right when I was like in that middle zone, the camera spinning and then the seat started to move in like almost in the opposite direction, and I was like, ooh, that almost threw me off a sec. So I really love that. But aside from that, just the movie itself, really well done. I definitely enjoyed it. For anyone who doesn't know, this is set between 1 and 2, so it's an interquel, as they call it. So it's between Alien and Aliens. I thought they did a great job with that, and kind of referencing the first film, and obviously there's nothing to reference for the second because this comes before that. But I thought they did a really good job with that, and I was like, this is definitely cool. I love seeing the aliens in the film. They do a lot with these little dudes right here. They obviously they're not as cheery and happy as that, but the facehuggers, top notch. It's like the scene from Aliens, like 211. It's not just like, oh, they have like a creepy like facehugger scene. It's just like the scene in the trailer where it's just like a bunch of them, and then they get another moment a little later on. So there's a couple of moments where it's like facehuggers. Like, okay, normally it's just like, that's, you know, because they literally go through the stages throughout most of the films. Like, all right, facehugger, chest burster, and then that is the full alien. And in this, it's like you get to see a lot of facehuggers, and it's like just the threat of trying to avoid that is an entertaining moment within itself. So I was super happy to see that, because it's like, wow, you don't really get that a lot, and they are alien space spiders that will impregnate you, and you don't really want that. So just having more than one scene specifically tied to just facehuggers as like the first form of, before you even get to, you know, the full-on necromorphs and everything, is like, that's awesome. That it's just awesome. So that's me. And also I said necromorph, that's Dead Space. Xenomorph is aliens, but you know, that's where they go, you know, that's where they got it from. So I'm more used to saying necromorph than xenomorph. But before you get to the xenomorph, you get some good stuff with the facehuggers. You get a decent amount of characters. As you can imagine, they even spoil it in one of the trailers, one of the characters that dies, and I was like, I wish they didn't do that, but you know how it goes. Sometimes you just look around and somebody says a certain line, or somebody has a certain personality trait, and you're like, well, I'll see you when I see you, buddy, because you're talking too much, and I just know where this is headed for you. But there are some slight twists and turns in that, and I thought they did a pretty good job. The action was good. Some of the the ideas that they come up with to deal with some of the issues, I thought was actually pretty entertaining stuff I hadn't seen before. Once again, having skipped over the last like 2 films, maybe there was some stuff that kind of ties in. So when I reference those specific scenes and spoilers, I'll ask you guys to just be like, hey, does this have any connection to whatever? I don't even remember the name of the last 2 movies. Like, I saw Prometheus. Covenant, I know, was one of them, because I think that's the one where they had like the thing where it was like bashing its head on the ship. I remember that from the trailer, and I literally don't even remember what the last one was. I forgot there was one until I watched a review, and I was like, I forgot there was one after that. So there was some, I don't even know when, within some realm of time, there was another alien movie that I don't even know about, that I just missed it. So that's how good that movie did, I guess. But this one was really fun. I feel like there's not too much I can say as far as getting into the film, of course, without going into spoilers, but I thought all the actors did a good job, for as long as, however long they ended up lasting. I thought the ties to the overall lore, I thought was pretty cool for sure. The connection that they made with the first one, and even explaining how things kind of got set up going into this film. And I was like, oh, well, that's definitely pretty cool. So I think they did a really good job with the lore, and, it's an alien franchise. So it's like, they have the references for certain items and things like that. So I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. And some stuff once again was in the trailer where it was like a specific visual thing where I was like, oh, that's clearly meant to be aliens. And that, like that scene was even in the trailer, and they go even further beyond that in 2 separate ways, which I'll talk about when we get to spoilers. But all in all, definitely a fun film. If you like aliens, definitely check it out. Obviously, just aliens as a franchise. Whenever I say that, I'm like, should I specify aliens, the franchise, or Alien, the franchise, if you're going with the very first movie. So if you like it, this is definitely up there. I've only seen 4 of them, but I don't think it's wrong to say this is the 3rd best Alien movie. So, there you go. That's my personal opinion on it, but I think that'll probably end up being the common consensus. It'll probably still be Alien 1 and 2. However, you go back and forth on that one. And then I think this will probably end up being number 3. But those are my thoughts on it, non-spoiler wise. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend going to check it out, but full on spoilers from here on out. And we're actually going to start early on and just go from the beginning with the first facehugger scene. I love what they did with that, where, and obviously we got a little bit of this in the trailer, and I was curious how that was going to play out, because I'm like, all right, we know one person dies from this, and it was unfortunately the pilot, and it was like, all right, well, great scene that I definitely wish wasn't in the trailer, because her getting the like the X-ray band or the wand, I was like, oh, that's super cool. And then I was like, all right, that's how it leads to that scene that we saw from the trailer, and it's a great shot, and I was like, wow. That's one of those moments where I was like, you should not have put that in the trailer. And I'm curious if like if Eddie Alvarez or like even some of the writers are like, wow, thanks editors. Cause it's a different thing. I don't know why this is a thing, but most of the time trailers that get edited are done by like trailer editors. Like it's done by different people. It's not even done by the people that do the movie. It's different, like actual trailer editors that do those edits. So I whenever I see stuff like that, I'm like, you didn't think that was worth saving for the actual film, especially considering it's literally the first person that dies. Maybe that was kind of their argument, like, oh, well, they're gonna die early on, but it's like, you don't know that for like 30 minutes of the movie. So I thought it sucked that they showed that one off, but still a great sequence of events, and especially how that ended up playing out and how it led to almost all the other deaths. When you really think about like that first death, like it's really a chain reaction from that moment that keeps leading to all the other deaths. They don't feel as separate when you really like clock back every other person's death. So I actually kind of enjoyed how tied together each person's death seemed from like just one random moment. It's like, all right, that's how it started, but every other death that follows specifically ties to that death, because once she died, it was I don't have anyone's names, of course. Rain, and that's it. Rain and Andy are like the only 2 characters, but the pilot dies, and then you have the sister and the cousin. So the sister doesn't end up dying, and then it's like, okay, she finds the sack because it's basically morphing itself. So once she finds that, then the cousin tries to basically electrocute it. Seemed like he had a good plan, and then the tail sticking out, I thought it was just like, oh, it's dead at first, and like the tail kind of just pops out a little, and he's just staring at it, and I'm like, well, he's gone. Like, even if it was like just a visceral reaction, that's what I thought it was going to be. Like, it was just going to be like a spasm or something like that with it dying. And then it was like, well, boom, cut him right in the face. I also thought he was going to live after that. I was like, okay, it slashed him, he's going to have like a giant scar, and then he'll die later, because he's like the first wounded character that lives. And then it's like, oh no, the acid's just dripping on him, and I'm like, all right, you still got time, you still like roll over or something. And he's just freaking out. He already didn't lose his fingers, because I thought that was done once he got the cryo freeze like right on his fingers. I thought he was done right there. And then it was like he's got acid dropping on him, and it's just hitting him piece by piece. And I would love an explanation, if anyone could help me, I swear it seemed like he exploded, like, because he does this and he dies, and I was like, I don't understand what just happened at all, because it looked like a blood splat just like hit his chest. It seemed like he exploded. Like, well, obviously that doesn't make sense, but it also didn't look like he was hit with the tail again, like just through the center. So I was super confused. So if anyone can explain what happened in that moment, I would really appreciate that, because I was like, how did he just die? Because he was sitting there the whole time. I thought eventually he would just roll over, and then he just like, and he just dies like that. And I'm like, okay, the alien, I was even more confused because right after that, they show the sister trying to escape and the alien's like slowly popping out. So I'm like, I don't think it hit him, because I was looking at his shirt. I was like, oh, so he didn't get hit again, unless it was so fast and I just didn't see the cut. But I was like, I have no idea how he actually died, because it looked like he died like a video game character, where it was like he just went, and then just like he was just dead. And I was like, I'm confused. So I'm not 100% certain visually how he actually died in that. So if you could explain it to me, I'd greatly appreciate that one. But once he dies, they go into the sister escaping, and then of course the other characters go through the great scene with the facehuggers, where they go through and like they heat up the room, and then she gets on the comms and he's freaking out because it's like a loud slam, and so he gets the goosebumps. Then they have to take off. That was a really cool sequence. And then they get to the door, and then her death, even though technically it was, you know, Andy not hitting the button, it was still tied to the first person's death, where it was like she was trapped in that location, then she's trapped with the xenomorph. And I thought for sure she was dead. Obviously she doesn't die until much later. Her brother technically takes her place as far as being dead. But I thought for sure it was game over. I was like, oh, she's done. I was like, wow, they killed the woman with the baby. Turns out I was wrong. And then that came back in a completely different way than what I was expecting by the end of the film. But I love what they did with that. It was weird and gross and just utterly ridiculous by the end, but I loved it. So, you know, going through that sequence of events, I like the way it was handled, where it was like this one death was super tied in to every other character dying. It didn't really feel like it was just, oh, the xenomorph got him. It was constantly like, this person died because this person died. They were protecting this person, and then that person killed them, or, you know, protecting that person got them killed, stuff like that. Thought it was really well done. Everything they did with Andy, I thought was super cool, because I was like, okay, it starts off, and at first I was like, I thought he was the, you know, just from the little bit that I knew, I was like, I thought he was the robot. And then it starts off and he seems to have like a stutter and things like that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then it turns out he is the robot. He's the android. And it's because he was kind of broken and had like a messed up OS or whatever. And then once he has the upgrade, he turns into like every other robot of every other Aliens film, where he goes from being cool to being bad. And it's like, that's a cool way to do that, because it's always just like, all right, well, what's happening here? He also, of course, gets helped out, we'll say, by a classic robot in Rook, which was an interesting moment, because I was curious how they were going to play it, because at first I was like, and it's super weird, because from certain points, I swear it looked like Bishop. Like, I swear, like, before they showed the face, I was like, oh, it is Bishop. And then, because at first I saw the outfit and I was like, oh, that, you know, looks like, I couldn't remember his name. I remember Bishop's name more, but I was like, it looks like the dude from the first movie. And then when they show like a side profile and he was in darkness, I was like, oh no, it's definitely Bishop. And then they set him up and it was obviously it was CG. But it was like, oh no, it's definitely Rook. And that confused me. Like, I swear it went back and forth. I was like, oh, it's Bishop. And like, oh no, it's Rook. So I was definitely surprised by that one. Also, and this is one of those things where I was like, you know, continuity wise and all that stuff, I could have sworn he was destroyed as well in the first movie, but I don't remember it. Like, I know that it like ripped him apart. Like, it took his head off. So I was confused as to if he was the same one, but I think he gives a very specific line where he's like, where it made it seem like he was the actual one from the ship and it wasn't just like another copy of him. So I was like, I guess they rebuilt him. And then he got destroyed again, because I'm like, it ripped his whole head. Like, he was ripped apart in the first movie and they had to do the thing where it was just his head on the table. So I was confused by that a little bit, but it seemed like it was clearly meant to be that. And then at the same time, Bishop is based off of Weyland-Yutani. And then there's a bunch of issues with that. Like, is the dude actually dead? Did he fake his death? So I was like, I don't know if he's supposed to actually be the one from the movie. So the line made it seem like he was that. And it was like, all right, I guess they rebuilt him. But at the same time, we've also had other characters play two separate characters, being Bishop's actor, whose name I can't remember right now, with him being Bishop and then being like the real Weyland-Yutani in the third film. So I don't know. Like I said, I think I would assume he was the one from the actual first film, but at the same time, that wouldn't make a lot of sense, because they show them go to the Nostromo and they just get the alien, and it's like, all right, well, the alien's in a sack, or, you know, a cocoon basically, and then they take it and then it cuts to our main character. So, you know, it was kind of confusing there, where I'm like, he says stuff that makes it seem like he was on the ship, but he couldn't have been, because they didn't pick him up. So I don't know. It's just one of those weird things in the middle where maybe I misinterpreted it and he was just a different version. Same idea, obviously, where it's like, hey, this is what the mission is and stuff like that. So I like the role that he played. The CG was kind of, you know, it was obviously noticeable, but it wasn't horrible. It wasn't the worst. It was just like, oh, it just feels kind of weird when they do like close-ups on them and it just looks CG. The best part for sure was when it was on the TV. Like, that was absolutely perfect. I was like, that just looks legit because it's CG through the lens of alien tech, which is like old school 70s, 80s, you know, 90s CRT, tiny CRT TVs. So I was like, that looks absolutely perfect. They should have done that more, but it didn't bother me too much. It was just like, you know, whenever they do like the close-ups of him talking, definitely felt a little bit weird. And I was honestly a little surprised that they kind of went that route, admittedly, but still enjoyed it. I like the role that he played, being that menacing character, and how he adds to kind of the degradation of, at least morality wise, of another android that we kind of trust from the beginning, and then he starts to turn dark, and then that kicks off with him trying to basically kill the woman when she's infected. Like, hey, it's a 60-40 chance against your friend. And it's like, you know, the humans don't really understand like kind of that cold calculating concept. You got to help them get it. And it's like, I guess I got to kill her right now. And they should have let him. Obviously we know that, you know, personalities and emotions and whatnot, they obviously should have let him. But hey, it is what it is. And then it was kind of messed up. It was definitely that dark moment with the sister when it's like, you know, like, Andy, can you help? It's like, that's what it wants us to do. I can't. And it was like, that scene I really liked, and especially because I thought she actually died there, which I should have known that they wouldn't do that, because there's always a moment where one of the characters comes back, like being all cocooned and everything. And admittedly, I think this is the first time that I can recall, at least, you know, it's only my experience being 1, 2 in Prometheus. I don't think in 1 or Prometheus, the characters, or 1 or 2 or Prometheus, any of the characters actually live. They're alive in that moment. It's just before the chest burster either comes out of them, or it's before they're officially infected, because they're like just waiting to do it for whatever reason. So I think this is the first time I've seen someone actually be saved specifically from that point. I can't remember for the life of me in Alien vs. Predator if the person lived in that moment too. I think they at least got out, and I think it kind of ended the same way, where that person escaped the cocoon and then they still ended up dying a little bit later on. But either way, they saved the sister. They have their cool moment there, and that's where the brother gets killed off, brother / ex-boyfriend of the main character. They don't really get into that too much. It's just like, hey, here's kind of the sprinkle concepts of all this stuff. And so he gets taken out, and then we find out, oh, there's actually a buttload of xenomorphs. They've had, you know, technically we found out before that, but there's people lined up, you know, there were a bunch of little, more of the facehugger sacks, and they were all escaped. And it's like, oh, they've actually been kind of busy for a little while. And then you see people with obviously their chest bursting out. They did have the scene where they heat up the room, and like they have the first dead body, and then they show the back of the body, and then like most of his head is just gone, and like you see brain. I was like, that's pretty intense. That was pretty intense. But going through like the little cavern portion, we'll call it, we find out, you know, they've had people for quite a while. It wasn't just like, oh, everybody died and they got killed. Like, no, it was the natural progression. They were just kind of hidden in this one specific section of the ship before they ended up escaping. They'd been there for a little minute. Like the ones that escaped in the beginning of the movie weren't the only ones that escaped. Like there was already an escape with the main xenomorph. And I think like a lot of people in my head, I was just like, oh, you know, like the queen, I guess it would be the queen from the first movie, or I guess it was just one xenomorph. I'm not sure, but just a random xenomorph. It wasn't a queen. I just assumed it was like, okay, that one went on a tirade around the ship. They didn't have any facehuggers at that point. It just went crazy, and there was a moment where it said like printing was complete. So I think they were actually making them, which they kind of referenced later, being like, hey, you know, we had to manufacture like this purest element from their blood, and it actually is like the cure for life or whatever, which it definitely wasn't. But with that, I was like, all right, this is interesting. But I thought it was just one xenomorph killed a bunch of people, and I was like, oh, there were facehuggers down in this other section that escaped as well, and they were doing like their own thing and capturing people from around the ship and bringing them there. So that was a cool moment to find out that there were actually a bunch of xenomorphs, and then that kind of shifted it from alien to aliens officially, because it still seemed like it was just the one, and then they get to that segment and it's like, oh no, there's actually like that one was the one, and then it shifted into aliens from Alien. I was like, it's actually kind of cool. So I enjoyed that moment. It was crazy. And that's where we get the elevator shaft, which is probably like the most exciting elevator shaft we've had in Aliens, which I feel like that whole element was meant to be a reference to Aliens for sure. Like just having like everything they did from that point, like just having it be an elevator shaft, I feel like was somewhat of a reference, because they were like, all right, we can do this with the visuals. Yo, let's show she got Reeboks on. Let's have them say, get away from her, you bitch. And obviously they did in like a funny way with his stutter. But all of that, I was like, definitely a reference, like her getting off of the elevator and like the wind blowing and the visuals, all of that was clearly meant to reference the end of Aliens. So I like the way they did that. You know, it was definitely like all the nods were, you know, 100% there, but also everything they did was super cool. I liked what they did with that, where it was like, let's do zero gravity. You know, they go through the reference of, you know, talking about the cure and all that good stuff. And then it's like, all right, I got to go get my brother. I got to get my brother. You lost yours. That sucks for you. But take this, go to the ship and just, you know, go on autopilot. You get out and I'll find my way to escape. So Rain, of course, goes back for her brother, fixes him and everything. And then it's like, all right, we see, you know, we cut to the sister, is just what I'm gonna call her. She injects herself. And I was just like, well, that's going to go wrong. Obviously, we saw it with the rabbit, but I was just like, she did not need to really do that. And I guess, you know, just in that crazy moment, especially considering she was pregnant, where I was like, you know, if it saves my life, it'll also save my baby's life. Wrong on both counts, but you know, she didn't really know, but it was definitely a bad move to do that. Got to the ship. She still seems super weak, which is funny considering what we saw with the rabbit. It was like, oh, it's weird that this didn't work in any regard, even for her. Even if it was like she still had like the crazy baby situation, I was still kind of shocked that it went through that process and still did like nothing for her. Like nothing happened for her, where it was like, oh, I feel great. And like she was on the ship and was like, you know, perky and awake when they got there. And was like, hey, what took you guys so long? She was like almost passed out. Like that didn't seem to do anything of value for her at all when she did it. And all it ended up doing was getting her killed and turning her baby into like a super crazy freak monster. So unfortunate situation, but we got a cool 0G shot where they go through and then it's like they can shoot up all the aliens and they do like, you know, the aim assist. I thought was pretty cool. Even got like I think like 1 or 2 facehuggers during that final little section as well. And then they have to go through and like get through the acid. They don't get burnt, so that was nice. And then it's like, all right, well, we can't use the elevator because of the low gravity. So all right, we'll climb up, no big deal. And then of course it becomes a big deal because there's still more aliens. There's more aliens, and then they do the purge. And I thought that was a great moment where the gravity purges itself. And then the xenomorph catches her as she's falling. And it just kind of looks at her. It's like, I got you. I'm gonna kill you, but I got you for now. And then everything ends up working out for them in the craziest way possible. Because of course she lost her gun as they were floating up, but Andy's able to get it. And that's of course after the elevator shaft drops back down, kills a bunch of those xenomorphs. And so then you got acid coming in, sucking all the air out of the bottom because they were on the lowest level, which was a really cool way to do that, which of course was how they referenced it in the beginning when they got the guns. Like, well, why'd you give us guns? It was like, you know, threat assessment, it might keep them away. It didn't do too much of that. And I don't think we've ever really seen that happen before anyway, but led to a great sequence. You know, they were doing the stupid dad jokes, and then the zero gravity made her realize, oh, if we turn off gravity, then it'll be, you know, the acid won't fall. Perfect plan. They end up escaping, a great little like quick action sequence. And then, you know, get to the elevator shaft, kill all of them. Once the gravity comes back, everything gets crushed. I thought that was going to cause more problems with crushing all the xenomorphs, especially, you know, the whole acid and sucking the air out thing. It seemed like that was actually a nice solution where it worked really well, because I was like, well, if you crush them all, that's like a pool of acid, and then the whole thing, you know, it would still take time to fall through the ground. But I'm like, that was a couple of them just flattened, and you just got acid, like a pool, a straight up floor of acid that's going to burn through, and the elevator is going to drop. That doesn't really end up happening. It seemed like that happened. It hits the ground, and then it was just like, it just stopped, and it was fine. I was like, oh, I thought for sure it was like, how are they going to get the F out of this one? It's going to burn through the ground. The whole elevator is going to fall. The whole shaft is going to pull them down. That doesn't end up happening. They go through. Andy drops down, kills the xenomorph, does get away from her, you bitch. They escape back to the ship. Then it's like, all right, classic Aliens moment. Seems like the movie's over. We're going to actually get to the planet. We probably got like, you know, 4 or 5 people less than we were anticipating, but that's how movies go. Then we have everyone, you know, it's about to get into stasis mode. Then it's like, all right, something's going wrong. Of course, she's having the baby. Super duper early, super freaky egg thing just pops right out of her. And then it's like, oh, so that infection you gave yourself transferred straight to the baby, instantly kicked it off, where it was like, all right, baby's ready to be born. It pops out, looks normal at first. It looks like an actual small baby. The sac is actually full of acid, which I thought was a really cool idea. And then she drops it and it goes down to like the base of the ship, which I thought was a really interesting little thing, where it was like, it's just like the little cargo base and it's just like full of like black sand. So I thought that was a cool visual, where it was like, oh, I didn't think that there was another part of this ship we hadn't seen. And I love the way they handled that. It's like, all right, gotta find this monster. Let's see what in the world's going on. And then it ends up being like a weird human xenomorph hybrid. And it looks, the face they specifically made look like the Prometheus things. I don't remember the history of what the deal was with them in any way, shape, or form. So I don't remember any of that stuff. but I know it looked like him. It had the black eyes, had like, you know, slightly human face. And I was like, oh, that's really creepy. And it had, you know, like the skinny body. It kind of had the tubes, like the start of the tubes. It looked like they were like only like that thick. And I was like, this is gross and weird looking. And it's just like that disproportionate human physique. And obviously it had the tail and the spikes and stuff. And instead of like just the little face that like punches through and like snaps at you, it kind of like sucks the blood out of you like a vampire, I guess, because that's what it did to its mom. I thought 100% that they were gonna have like a really gross scene where it was like breastfeeding from her, and I was like, that's crazy. That's not what happens. It just straight up kills her, which I thought was wild. Also, I feel like they didn't do much with her. Like, of course, the infection not doing anything to her, I did think was really weird, especially because they had the moment where she like, I guess, touches her chest. That's why I thought it was gonna do something weird like with the breastfeeding thing, because I'm like, is it like ooze coming out of her boobs or something gross like that? But she like took her hand and it was, all she did was this, like just touch her chest, and it was like goop. And I was like, so is she changing, or is that like, did that come out of her and the thing is like still has to feed from her? And then it was like they almost just skipped over that because it seemed like that is an odd thing to show, and then it meant nothing because I was like, okay, well, she didn't transform like the rabbit did, and they didn't have the super gross scene that I thought was about to happen, where I thought this thing was gonna like breastfeed goo from her. Happy with that. I'm totally fine, but it does feel like something got skipped over there. And then when Rain goes back up, it just kills her off. Like it just kills her, because I thought it wasn't going to do that either, because it sniffed her and it's like, it's clearly like the mother. So I was curious how that was going to play out, and then it kind of just goes to no transformation, no like gross breastfeeding scene. It just kills her, and then that was it. And I was like, oh, that's not what I thought was going to happen story wise. I thought something different was going to happen here, and then it was like, no, it just straight up kills her. And I was like, oh. And then it could have been partially, it did seem like it changed a little when she started to like try to swat it away, like get away from me. It did seem like it got angry, and that's when it started to scream. And then it was just like, oh, well, okay, well, if you're gonna fight me, I'm gonna just go ahead and end this. So if I watch it again, I'd probably get that. But when I first saw it, it felt like something got skipped over, and it was like, oh, it just led to her die. Like it just straight up killed her. Like none of the maternal bond stuff happened, none of the transformation thing happened. She just died. And then, you know, obviously she doesn't become like another monster after they kill that technically kill her kid. She was just gone, and that was it. And I was like, oh, I was really surprised by that, because it seemed like there was another step to something that they were going to do with her character. But she unfortunately gets killed. Andy gets like cut in the neck, and then that leaves our final girl, and she goes through her moment. They do a really good as far as I'm concerned, it was a reference to the game, because when she puts on the suit, it looks just like the image from the game, which I can't remember the subtitle of the game, but whatever the name of that game was, which was really good, she looked just like that. And I was like, oh, that's cool, you know, get the lights and everything. So they have their final confrontation. You know, she tried to use the cryo thing, that screwed up, had to go into, you know, get in the suit and everything like that. And then they have like the final ploy, which is to just drop the base out. She gets obviously 3 out of 4. Then of course she gets messed up, and then it's a crazy scenario where she's like floating in space, and it was a great visual. I love the visual of like the ship when they were just on like the whole platform, and it was crashing into the asteroid belt, or I guess technically it was just the asteroid rings. I thought the visuals for that were fantastic. Like it looked super cool to me, just watching it like slowly go down, and it wasn't crashing through. Like you see that a lot where it'd be like, oh, we're going through the rings and whatever ship they're in is big. It was like, no, when you crash into this, that's it. Like that, the whole timer going down, it wasn't an understatement. The ship was not stronger than those rings, and every little piece was just shredding the ship. It wasn't like kind of breaking off. It was like it went right into a laser beam and was just getting shredded to pieces. I loved how that looked visually. And then them kind of going through that where it's like, oh, the ship went off autopilot, so they're like diving into it. Obviously, she pulls the final lever, the monster dies, which was a great sequence, because you know they do this scene where it's like, oh, you know, she kicks the acid over and it sucks it out, and it's like, oh, everything seems good, and then it like lands on her, it's all melted, and then it's trying to like crack her mask, and it's like squeezing her face and stuff and trying to break it, and then of course she pulls the lever, it dies. I think she said, "Go fuck yourself" or "Die mother." I think she just says like, you know, "Die motherfucker," and it was a great visual. It goes off. It dies. You still have the ship in the background still crashing and like grinding into the belt, which I thought was actually really cool. And then it's like, all right, she made it. She pulls herself up. She's like, all right, I'm gonna fix my brother. She has the chip, and well, they solved that whole problem. They do all that. They still have their couple of vials, and then it's just like, all right, we're gonna go to this planet. I'm gonna save my brother. And then they do the ending where she does her voice recording, and that's Alien Romulus, and it was really, really good. Yeah, I love the visuals. I love the unique way that they use not only the facehuggers, but like going through and being like, how do we deal with acid on a spaceship? Which once again, I've skipped 2 movies, so I don't know if they've really touched on that. But I feel like Acid, you know, much like the Facehuggers kind of getting a bump up, I feel like the Acid got a bump up in storytelling, where it was like, hey, the Acid legit, like I said, I don't really understand how the dude died because it looked like something in his chest exploded, but the Acid was like melting through him. The Acid caused them to have like the whole final segment was like, hey, we got to cut off the gravity, otherwise we'll get sucked out of this ship. So that led to a crazy action sequence, and then they still had the gravity turn on and melt everything at the bottom of the ship, and then the egg sac acid helped her kill the final monster. It was like the acid actually got used a lot in this movie. And I don't think, and this is a crazy thing to say, but one of my favorite things that they've ever done with the xenomorph acid was Alien versus Predator, when they show, and I'm pretty sure it was the Predator, and it tried to like do like the tightrope thing that like slices people up. It was cutting into the xenomorph, but then it exploded because the xenomorph acid was like melting the thing as it was trying to constrict. So it just, all the parts where it was cutting into it just popped off. So it kind of exploded around the xenomorph, and it was scarred, but it couldn't kill it because it burnt through the wire. And I was like, that's actually super cool. That's probably like my favorite thing from that movie, because that's the only part that has always stuck out in my head. I was like, I love that idea where it's the main thing that like, it just squeezes you tighter and tighter and cuts you into pieces. But it can't do that when once you start bleeding from being cut to pieces, you just melt the wires. So now, since Alien versus Predator has the acid for a xenomorph been so well utilized? Personal opinion, as the dude who skipped the last 2 Alien movies, so I have no idea what they did in those. But it got a bump up as far as I'm concerned. The Facehuggers definitely got a bump up, and they did yet another crazy thing, because this isn't the first time we've had a baby xenomorph hybrid, but it is the first time that it's looked like a human, because in Covenant, I think, yeah, that was the one where they did the same thing, but that came out and it basically did just look like a xenomorph. So that, yeah, it wasn't nearly in the same realm of just weirdness like they did in this movie, but definitely enjoyed it. I thought it was super cool. It kind of makes me want to go see find a way to see the last 2 movies. As much as people hate how things were expanded upon lore wise, it does make me more curious now, because I'm like, I do kind of like the story and world of Aliens, but every time a movie comes out, people are like, this just kind of sucks. And then that just makes me be like, I actually like the lore a lot for Aliens. And then that makes me not want to see the movies. Like, I do actually care about the lore, because I think they do at least for the first 2 movies, I think they do a surprisingly good job. Just being like, hey, this is, the horrible company that knows about this and all that stuff, and this is across, the galaxy. It makes it more entertaining. And then it's like, oh, it's unfortunate that some things have been explained in kind of the worst ways. It's unfortunate, but this one kind of made me want to see the last 2 just to get more alien stuff. That's how much I enjoyed this movie. So we'll see what happens with that. I think they're all on Disney, but all on Disney Plus. You can watch them because it was Fox. So I think it is on there. Actually, I might check them out. But those are my thoughts on Alien Romulus. I actually think it was a really good film. We'll see what ends up happening going forward. If they'll do another interquel, another sequel, maybe even a super duper crazy prequel, which I think that's what Prometheus was, if I'm not mistaken. I don't really remember, but we'll see what happens going forward with the Alien franchise. Maybe we'll get another amazing game. There is some lore out there because of that game that they can do some stuff. So we'll see what ends up happening. But as far as I'm concerned, we got a good Aliens movie, and that's very nice to hear and just to experience. So I would love to know your thoughts on things Alien, Alien 1, 2, 3, Prometheus, the other 2 movies I literally don't even know the name of, Covenant. Actually, Covenant was the one before last, and I just have no concept of what the last movie was, which blows my mind. There's just a movie out there that exists, and I'm just like, I don't even know what it is. So we'd love to know your thoughts on all things Alien, Aliens, and beyond. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.